우리들에게 묻는다 시간입니다. 소프트웨어 연합, 이 BSA라는 곳은요, 70여 곳의 글로벌 소프트웨어 기업들이 모여서 소프트웨어 개발, 또 지식재산권 보호를 위해서 활동하는 단체인데요. 오바마 행정부에서 지식재산 정책 총괄 책임자를 역임했었던 BSA의 빅토리아 에스피넬 회장이 우리나라를 찾았습니다. 정부 관계자들과 소프트웨어 분야의 협업을 논의하기 위해서인데, 김영교 기자가 이 빅토리아 에스피넬 회장을 만나서 한국 소프트웨어 시장에 대해서 얘기를 나눠봤습니다. 보시겠습니다.
Good to have you with us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Many of our viewers are not familiar with BSA. Could you tell us what it does?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the way I think about our mission, we represent the software industry. Software is incredibly important, not just to the global economy, but to how we live our lives every day. And our job at the Software Alliance is to try to make sure that our companies have the freedom to be able to innovate and develop their products and their services and to be able to deliver those to people around the world. And it's our job to make sure that governments around the world are putting policies in place that promote software and let software innovate and thrive. One of the fun parts about my job is getting to think about and talk about how software is changing the world and what people are able to do with software. Software is, at the end of the day, software is a tool, and it's a really amazing, innovative, hard to develop tool. But what is important about software is what it lets people do. And it is really incredible what people are doing, what architects are doing, what engineers are doing, what doctors are doing using software today. It's absolutely amazing. And it's really amazing to see how software is having an impact on people's daily lives. In all sorts of ways, software makes it easier and better and more enjoyable to live your life today. And that's one of the really fun parts of my job.
So what business would BSA have in Korea?
So we have lots of business in Korea. Korea is an incredibly important market for our members. We've been very excited to see the creative economy become a big focus for the Korean government. So it's wonderful to see how much focus the government has here on technology. We have lots of policy issues in Korea. So one of those is related to cloud computing. The software industry has changed dramatically over the last 5 years. And the software industry is moving more and more to the cloud. It's moving more and more to a subscription model. And that's causing big disruption inside the industry. And in Korea, and Korean companies can really help be at the forefront. And the Korean government can put policies in place so that the Korean people are getting the benefit of that change, and so that Korean governments and U.S. companies are able to thrive. So there's lots that's happening in Korea. It's a really exciting place to be.
We hear a lot about cloud computing these days. Why is it crucial for companies to adapt to cloud computing?
And I'm going to answer it with a really personal example. So a few years ago, my husband decided to start a company. He's a very entrepreneurial person. And he was able to get his company started with 2 employees and a small amount of money. And he was able to do that because of cloud computing. If he had been trying to start this company 10 years ago, he would have had to buy servers in-house because he was running a tech-oriented company. He would have had to buy servers in-house. He would have had to hire employees to run them in-house. He would have probably had to have 15 people to manage the IT side of his business. What cloud computing does, what cloud computing does is it allows companies, smaller companies, who don't want to have an entire data center or entire server bank in their company, it allows smaller companies to rent server space. In other words, it allows them to rent computer power. And the reason that makes sense economically is there's very few companies that are big enough to be able to actually use all their server capacity all the time. So if you're a smaller company, you're using the servers, you're probably only using them for 10%, 20% of the time. And then all that capacity is just going to waste. What cloud computing lets you do is take that capacity and give it to other small companies or other large companies that need that capacity, so you're using it more efficiently and servers aren't lying idle. But the reason that that's important is because it lets companies dramatically cut cost in terms of their IT bill. And if they cut costs of their IT bill, then they can use that money for other things. They can use that money for research and development. They can use that money for marketing. They can use that money to pay their personnel more. They can use that money to give it to shareholders for profits. So it dramatically cuts costs on IT. And the other things that it lets you do besides cut costs is it gives smaller companies the ability to have a level of capacity that was never possible for them before. Because they are essentially renting space on data centers and servers, they now have access to huge amounts of computing power that lets them internally do all sorts of things in terms of data analytics or providing services to their customers that literally would not have been possible 10 years ago. So it is very exciting, and it has an impact on people's lives in ways that are hard to measure, or it has an impact on people's lives in ways that I think are hard to recognize. But the effects that we're having for society would be driving down cost for companies, including really small companies, and allowing all sorts of companies to have access to the kinds of storage and computing power that wasn't possible a decade ago.
During your visit to Korea this week, I assume that you had meetings, various meetings with Korean government officials or even Korean companies. Were there any fruitful results from the meetings?
Well, so I think one thing that was very clear from the meetings is how focused the Korean government is on trying to promote its creative economy and trying to make sure that there is innovation going on here in Korea. And that is great news. The government is very focused on tech issues, very focused on software issues, so that's very helpful. I think with a number of policies, and there are some places where we have concerns about policies the Korean government might implement, but we're also hearing a real openness to working with us and to listening to industry's concerns. And the Korean government may not address all of our concerns, or they may not agree with all of our concerns, but we are hearing a real willingness to work with the industry and seriously listen to our concerns, and that's extremely helpful.
What is essential for the government to run a creative economy?
What is key to a government promoting a creative economy is to get out of the way of people that are creative, to create an environment where creativity can thrive, and then step back and let people do what they do best. I think there's a real human drive to be creative and to be innovative, and the most helpful thing that governments can do is step back and let that process happen without that much interference. Now, there are some things, having a skilled workforce, so having a big emphasis on education, making it clear to young people that innovation and creativity is something that should be valued, and giving them access to programs where they see that. That's, I think, something very helpful the government can do. Protection of innovation is important, so people know that if they do innovate or they're in creative fields, that the government will protect their work, and I think is very important.
Victoria, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. This was fun.